and welcome to the Hutchinson's Veterans Outreach Program. My name is Lisa Dittel, and today I have with me John Delvin from Homefront, and who's also working with the Fabulous Armadillos. Welcome.
Well, thank you.
Now, could you tell us a little bit about Homefront, what you do, and how long you've been with it?
Sure. Well, first, let me tell you a little bit about myself. I'm Major John Donovan. I'm a retired major from the Minnesota Army National Guard. I spent 27 years in the military. I first joined when I was fresh out of college and full of debt. And I thought, I'll join the Army and they'll pay back my student loans and I'll get to see Europe. And I did so with the intention of serving 4 years.
Okay.
27 years later, I retired.
Wow.
I was a veteran of the Cold War. I had a break in my military service. I ended up staying in Europe for quite a while. I worked as a high school counselor at the Nuremberg American High School. Then I did a stint in Saudi Arabia. Then I moved to the East Coast and I worked for Job Corps there in upstate New York. And then I came back to my home in Minnesota and I applied for a commission with the Minnesota Army National Guard. I was commissioned as an officer in 2000, and just a year later 9/11 happened. I got called up for duty, active duty, shortly after 9/11, and I was on active duty ever since my retirement of March 2018. Upon my retirement, I joined the Homefront Resource Center, which is a nonprofit in St. Cloud, and we service the central Minnesota area. So our mission is to be the voice, the connector, and the educator for the community around veterans, service members, and their families. The voice. We advocate on behalf of veterans. So, for example, we just had 650 soldiers from the Minnesota National Guard deployed to the Middle East. And we want to let people know about that and that their families need help back here and that those soldiers need support while overseas.
Exactly.
The educator. We do programs like the program that we're doing with the Fabulous Armadillos. And this program is called What's Going On? It's songs from the Vietnam era. We call it the Vietnam soundtrack. And this is a collaboration that we're doing with the Fabulous Armadillos, which we can get into a little bit later, but suffices to say, it is a concert experience that brings the sights and sounds of the Vietnam era to the audience. And we use this as an education method to remember, reflect, and respect on that era in our history. And then finally, connector. We connect people to services. So if a soldier or a service member, a veteran or a family member comes to us and says that they need help with counseling, they need financial help, they need help finding a home, they've just moved into the area. These are situations that we can provide them services for, and if we can't do it directly, we find a service provider within the community who can provide those services.
Okay. Do you mainly work with people up in the St. Cloud area?
So we service the central Minnesota area, but we've had requests for help from as far away as, here Hutchinson,
okay.
The Minneapolis-St. Paul area, the Camp Ripley area. So when we say central Minnesota, our geographic ring probably runs in about a 60-mile radius around the St. Cloud area.
Okay.
When people come to us looking for those kind of direct services, we refer them over to a military services coordinator that is supervised and paid for by Goodwill Easter Seals.
Okay.
So they come to us, and then we refer them to our military services coordinator, who will make sure that they get the services that they need, and if they can't get those services met by local resources, then he or she will find those services elsewhere. So that's one of our partnerships. We partner with, as I mentioned earlier, St. Cloud State University, St. Cloud Technical and Community College. We also partner with industry in the area. Many of them will look to us for veterans because, one, unemployment is so low right now, and because veterans just make great employees. Their work ethic, their physical stamina, the fact that they have been drug-free, the fact that they have no criminal background that made them eligible for services in the armed forces. that also makes for a great employee on the civilian sector. So we have employers who come to us often and say, hey, we have these job openings if you know of any veterans, and then we push that out through our network to provide those potential leads to employers so that our veterans can get gainfully employed after they leave service.
Now, I wanted to go over a little bit about the financial part of your organization. From my understanding, you were given a grant that happens to be coming up again this next year. Is there any way or any place in particular, if you have somebody on here that would like to donate to your organization, that they can do that?
Well, absolutely. But let's talk about that grant for a minute.
Okay.
Because we teased it a little bit earlier in the introduction, and I'd like to get back to it. And it's a grant that we wrote to the Humanities Center about this time and era of Vietnam. Right now, we are taking a look at the 50-year anniversary of American involvement in Vietnam, the high watermark of the war years, 1968, 1969. And in terms of casualties and lives lost in Vietnam, that was the high watermark, and it was a terrible time.
Yep.
Ken Burns put out a documentary called The Vietnam War a couple years ago. And from that, money was proportioned from the National Endowment for the Arts and came down to the Humanities Center in St. Paul. That was also augmented with money from the Legacy Fund through the Minnesota State Legislature. And the Humanities Center sent out a request for proposals to communities throughout Minnesota, asking them to do programs around remembering Vietnam. So my organization, the Homefront Resource Center, put in a grant request, and we entitled our program Central Minnesota Remembers Vietnam. Okay. Well, this money was given to us, and part of that we used to partner with a band that is probably familiar to your viewers called the Fabulous Armadillos, and they really are fabulous. An incredible, incredible group of musicians. And we approached them a while ago and asked them, would you be interested in doing music around the Vietnam era? We were hoping maybe you could do like 3 or 4 songs in one of your concerts as kind of a tribute to Vietnam vets. And they responded to us, 3 or 4 songs, why don't we do a whole show?
Very nice.
And we were gobsmacked. I couldn't believe it. They put together this incredible concert experience. It's 2 hours of music from that Vietnam era, interspersed with the sights and videos and pictures of the Vietnam era. And then we've also combined soldier experiences and soldier narration within the concert. Now, this is the impact that it's had. As a person who lives on grants and writes grants, you're always trying to show that you've used the money appropriately and what you've done resonates and is appropriate.
Exactly.
But oftentimes, all you can do is really rely on anecdotal information, feedback. What did people say? To date, I have 23 pages of feedback from concert goers.
Wow.
And they continue to come in today. Comments via Facebook, comments via email, comments via text about how moving this concert experience was. I had one person say, I didn't know I was going to 2 hours of therapy. We had one woman who said that her husband had been killed in Vietnam and that she had gone out to the wall in the hopes of seeing his name and having some kind of catharsis, some kind of meaning put to this experience.
Exactly.
She said it didn't happen. She came to this concert and she got that catharsis, she got that closure that she was looking for. So if any of your viewers are out there and they have an opportunity to go see what's going on, I highly encourage it. It is a great, great experience, a great show. But to your other question about donations, absolutely. We receive no DoD money. So many of your viewers are probably familiar with the Family Assistance Center. And a Family Assistance Center is a family assistance center that is set up in Camp Ripley and Brooklyn Park, and there's one in Duluth and Mankato and Rochester. There are approximately 9 of them throughout the state of Minnesota. And they're what we call purple money. They're for the Army green and the Marine Corps red and the Navy blue and the Air Force blue and then the reservists, and it's all this pools of money that go in to serve all of those entities. But if you're just a friend of a service member, right, and you've been impacted by his or her absence, you can't get serviced by the Family Assistance Service, by that center, because there's no money that picks you up. Okay. Not so with the Homefront Resource Center. We would be able to direct that person to somebody who is familiar with deployment issues, anxiety, stress, separation, grief, loss, and get them to the right counseling service. Because we don't receive DOD money. Okay. But with that, we are dependent upon the contributions of grants, the contributions of just people within the community, businesses, supporters of the service and military members. So if any of your viewers would like to donate to the Homefront Resource Center, they certainly can. We're a 501c3, and you can find us online, and we also have a Facebook page called Homefront Resource Center.
Today we are out here at St. Cloud University talking to Zach Menges. Hello.
Hello.
What I'd like to know a couple of things. First of all, what service branch were you in?
I was in the Minnesota Army National Guard.
And how long were you in for?
Wonderful, 6 and 2, so 8 years, yeah.
So can I ask, why did you join?
Well, I actually went to school here when 9/11 occurred, and I remember where I was, my brother and I were in the ROTC program here, and it was a lot to witness for everybody at that point in our lives. And at that point, I just didn't know who I was. I was still trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life, but the ROTC program was kind of my first glimpse into the military life. My grandfather served in World War II over in the Philippines, and I've done history on his service when I was younger, and enlisting, and I never looked back. I just eventually got over to Iraq in 2011, and came back and decided that my time was to stay back here and finish school, and eventually turned into working with veterans here, which I really enjoy. So the Veterans Resource Center at St. Cloud State started actually in 2006, and it was a place for veterans to go. We had over close to 800 veterans at the time, and we realized the university had been working in conjunction with the Minnesota Department of Veterans Affairs to create a hub here in the central region for our veterans to go and receive services and support to get their education completed. We're located in the Administrative Services Building, which offers every single person who's going to go look at a school or look at our school comes into this building. And so with our military and veterans needing that additional support, used to being told this is the structure that you need to have, these are the bullet points that you need to complete your mission, we're able to do that right from the start when they're looking at going to school. So we have a duty to educate people here on our campus, and that means also educating them on what suicide ideation might look like, what somebody with depression looks like, recognizing those signs and symptoms, those red flags out there, because those one or two notices or an email quickly to somebody, or just recognizing that they're in pain, might save their life, and so that's really important. So we're doing that on Thursday, and it's our chance to just really sit down and talk to students about that, and hope. And in the past, when we've done this, we've had people that open up and said they lost their boyfriend when they came back from Iraq to suicide, and they had not talked to a counselor yet. We've had staff members here who lost family members who have not talked to a counselor. So we have the VA involved. We get our Active Minds. It's a student-led organization on campus here. The Student Veterans Organization, the Resource Center here. Our counseling services are free to all students and our staff as well too. So we have them participate.
There is no stigma about coming up and saying, hey, listen, I need to deal with some stuff.
No.